everyone. I'm here to discuss our research findings on climatic dynamics and food security implication in Sub-Saharan Africa. A research work carried out by myself, Asogwa Ikechukwu Sebastian, and Onyebudam Lilian Akunna from Michael Rotler University of Agriculture, Mudike, Abia State, Nigeria. We will guide our discussion by the outline as you can see. One is background evidence, two is problem statement, three is climatic change and food security, four analytical framework, results and interpretation, then conclusion. Agricultural performance in the world is currently tied to some climatic factors and patterns that vary across zones and regions. However, the role of climatic dynamics, determinants, and the disparity in climatic zones pose major challenges on the realization of food security. The question is here now, can we get the full understanding of what food security is all about? According to Belloni 214, food security is now conceptualized as a multi-dimensional issue that is complex to include and expanded to include both food production index, mortality, life expectancy. On the other hand, climate factors include rainfall and annual temperature, majorly. From here, you can see why we are talking about climate variability. Why is it a problem across the globe? It's because we don't have a steady climate change or climate across the regions, even countries. If you look at that table there, you will see the variation of climate indicators measured in precipitation, evaporation, runoff, and so as you might have it across the regions. And look at African zone, the colors there also show some of the agricultural ecological zone that differs from countries, which is agriculture, which is in Sub-Saharan Africa. And that points a question or poses a problem. How can we obtain food security in midst of all this variation? So now let us also look at the response of, we are using this graph to look at the response of food production to temperature specifically. You can see from this graph, we don't have a stable relationship of food production to temperature. Then this graph tries to tell us that food production is not stable with the temperature, what is obtainable, our temperature that is obtainable. Hence, we'll go further to, this also poses more questions or more problems that we have seen, the evidence from World Bank indicators, where food security has declined in between 2014 and 2016, the value of food security indicator declined to $161 million as measured in value. Then at the same time, from what it was in 163. So also, while we are talking about this, some of the factors that could contribute to food security in terms of arable land and per hectare per person that is used for agriculture. Also, all of them are in decrease order. In 2011, between 2011 to 2014, we also have arable land for agriculture declined to 42.14% from what it was 43.13. So with the temperature fluctuation, with the climatic variability, the gains from agriculture continues decline, including the employment share from agricultural sector, has also declined currently. Between 2017 to 2018, we have a decline of 4.1% as against what you can have across the globe also why food security amidst of that still persists. So now the question now is our interest, research interest is how can we understand, we really want to ascertain the impact of our climatic dynamics in time, that's time, on food security. And given that we have, following Belloni 214, food security is now of multi-dimension, which include both food production and malnutrition. So we will adopt an analytical framework that will measure these two major objectives or two major targets that we are looking at. And from that, let us build a model for climate change that will mimic what that will relate or show as a function of food security. Now, looking at that, according to from Bellon 214, that adopted agronomic crop yield model. Also, measuring global water balance, as mentioned by Ray and Cell 212. We have that food security is a function of GW as is a function of GWB, which is global water balance, as measured as calculated by that, where we have FS there shows food security, vector of food security. In our own scope, we are going to include food security to catch food production and under nutriment population growth rate. X is the total water stored. P and E, they are the corresponding global flows of precipitation and evapotranspiration. Now, we are not going to stop there because we are looking at also food production, which relates a non-linear model. So we are going to embark a Cobb-Douglas production function to relate the food production that shows a non-linear relationship with the factors of production. Now, we will have, from that, we are going to have an output that is a function of a nonlinear factor of climatic factor and non-climatic factor. So from that, when we take the log of that Cobb-Douglas, we are going to have a linear function, which will allow us to specify our model as below. Then, now, having our model, we have two major targets that we want to obtain food security in terms of food production and food security in terms of undernutrition growth, population growth rate. So now the first scenario that we are looking at, the first model we are looking at is now food security in terms of production. That is a function of ISLAG, labor as factor of production, then other non-climatic factor of production, including arable land. Temperature is a climatic factor, rainfall, then log of value added output, land use, and irrigation. So we will try to analyze this to actually show what the impact of both the climatic and non-climatic factors of production on the food production. So going by the second model, which we also intends, the second specification, we intend to what? Ascertain the impact of climatic factors on the undernutriment population rates. All the independent variables there remains the same, except the UP, which is donates the undernutriment population growth rate. And also the time, the lag, we measure, try to capture our dynamics. So now, going further, we are employed the model of GMM short panel, and for us to make any decision concerning to ensure that our result is not spurious, we are going to base our interpretation in some of the several texts that we all know while adopting panel model, like Sagan-Hexen, autoregressive 1, 2, and as case may be. So now from that, our judgment would then be based on that. We are on these define the outcome of these tests, and we are going to measure to check this in 3 scenarios. One at levels at each normal, the first step different, the second step different, that difference of difference, before making our decision. Then the scenario 1 we are looking at is trying to tell us, regress the factors, effect of climatic and non-climatic factors of production on food production. That is the first aim which we targeted. And from that, we can see that the dynamic impact as in time reveals that over time it has what if a 0.59% incremental impact on food security. So that shows us that time also play a significant role in determining food production. Then also temperature, as expected, shows an inverse relationship in food production. We are not surprised over this outcome because it is as expected and in conform with other research that we have seen prior before now that are also reviewed. Likewise, in the short run, okay, similarly also the arable land expansion as a non-climatic factor also show that and it shows an incremental impact on food production also in the short run. So let's also look at the continue. From that observation, we can see that why temperature, observing from the impact of an increase in temperature and impact on arable land, it could suggest that expansion of arable land, that is land for agriculture, could as well reverse the negative impact of temperature as shown there. So you can see this the result. The first one is at this normal, the first step GMM, the other is second step GMM, difference of difference, and all those judgments are resolved as below. So we move the scenario 2 now. We are trying also, let us also take the food security in terms of under population growth rate. Then it also shows that we are having on the lag to the time to have up to 0.80% positive impact. That is positive impact, incremental impact on malnutrition. That is also confirms that time is very much paramount to to determine food security measured in undernutrition indicator. Then we also have the effect of temperature was not significant on the determination of undernutrition population growth rate. Although positive, yeah, temperature was not significant, but it also shows a positive relationship with undernutrition, another segment of that food security. In contrast, arable land, as unlike it should, has an inverse relationship. So now this one is questionable. Why one can say, why is it positive with food production and negative in undernutrition production? Could it be that the lands that we are using for agriculture, they are not using it to produce a nutritious meal? That could be very fine, because in Africa, Nigeria, for instance, the major staple agricultural product lies on what? Cassava. Everybody cassava and yam. So this could not be balanced if not for the intervention of policies that are talking about nutritional base across biofortification and rest of them. Down where people are now, attention is being geared towards how to improve nutrition-based crops. So the finding of the arable land is also very questionable and interesting for further investigation. So we continue. I've explained that. So also we will have that the population growth, the control of population for undernutrition, population growth rate revealed that the regional population growth led to the corresponding increase in the rate of growth of nutrition population. So then this also is the findings, the results table, as we can see, where we based our discussion on the first discussion. We based our discussion on the first, that is the second column. Here we are basing our discussion, our findings on the third column, as you might see. All of them, they are the same analysis, but with different operations. So in conclusion, further, we are saying our studies therefore conclude that this recommend expansion of arable land and encourage population control policy in order to negate the undesired effect of temperature on food production and nutritional security. In addition, population growth policy measure is encouraged in order to reduce the impact of high population of undernutrition growth rate. So we are saying that for us in Africa, it will be fine for us to engage, expand the provision of our arable land, which is a function of our land tenure system. And for us, not only that, it will also be interesting for us to know what the kind of agricultural practice carried on that. Like we move from just basically food production to a more nutritional based crop promotion or program that will help to both improve the food security and the nutritional security as measured in this finding. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, Ikechukwu. Please write down any questions that you may have for him. We discuss them in the end. We now continue with the presentation of Joy, also from Nigeria. She will also talk about extreme weather events and climate change.
Okay. Okay. I worked on assessment of female farm households management practices to extreme weather events in Southeast Nigeria. Like I said, I am a PhD student from Department of Agricultural Economics, University of Nigeria in Nsukka, and I also work with our Les Ekweme Federal University, Ebonyi State. Introduction. Climate change is a change in global weather patterns which are caused by more extreme weather events like storm, flood, drought, rainfall, temperature, erosion, extreme erosions, and drought. There's a relative roles of natural, environmental, and anthropogenic factors in this extreme weather event is not actually clear, but also remains a subject of debates and continued study. However, you see damages and losses associated with these extreme weather events like flooding, erosion, drought. When we talk about because the work was carried on Southeast Nigeria, I concentrated on flooding and erosion because you get droughts in northern states. So you see that damages, losses associated with these extreme weather events are more observable and discernible. And this could also include loss of human lives, physical displacement of equipment, buildings, losses and damages to croplands, especially crop under cultivation, livestock and livestock farms, fish and fish ponds. In fact, when the magnitude of 2012 flooding within Southeast was so much that it drew the attention of the present government then. During President Jonathan, Goodluck Jonathan. it drew the attention of the president and so many stakeholders to see what they can do to these farm households, especially the fact that most often they can't even help themselves. And also, it's even a current issue right now. If you come down to Southeast now, almost all farmlands under cultivation are submerged with flood, and those farmers, even their buildings and everything, their means of livelihood is at stake now. So it's a very major concern for us. And you look at the prominence among the livelihood of these farmers, it's basically farming, and it's always worst hit by this flood. And of course, agriculture is highly vulnerable, like I said, to this increased frequency of extreme weather events. And Nigeria being the sub-Saharan African and its location within the tropical latitude is always exposed to these destructive influences of climatically induced hazards. Then the question now is, what are the management practices by this farm household? Though this work concentrated on female farm households. So we want to look at, I try to look at the management practices of this female farm households. And the reason why I actually brought in gender to it is because most often you find out that most government interventions and coping strategies are usually targeted to male-headed households. And you find out that most often these female farmers are weak, that they can help themselves, and most of these interventions do not get to them. So this work actually focuses on what are they doing? They contribute to agricultural production in Southeast, and they are doing great for themselves. What are their management practices? Where are they? How do governments come in to also help them? So, like I said, management practices to climate change, it's human preventive or intervention methods aimed at reducing the direct effect of the increased greenhouse gases on agriculture. Then the objectives, irrespective of the coping strategies stated by by intergovernmental panel or change, just the problem statement. There seem to be differences in farmers' traditional ways of doing things. And actually understanding what climate change is and managing strategies to climate variability is quite crucial. It's very important at this period where we experience extreme weather events all year, almost all year round. Then we look at the objectives, look at the socioeconomic characteristics of these respondents. We assess the natural disaster management practices and look at the intensity of the usage of these management practices. Like I said, the data was carried out in Southeast Nigeria, and primary data was generated using a set of structured and pre-tested questionnaires in conjunction with oral interviews. Chromback Alpha was used to test the reliability of the questionnaires by experts like my supervisors and so many persons in so many stakeholders in agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture. Then information gathered was on farm households, socioeconomic characteristics, and the female farm management practices to this extreme weather events. Purposive and multi-stage sampling random technique were used for selecting the 240 respondents that we used for this work. Then first, 3 out of 5 states in the Southeast geopolitical zone were randomly selected, 2 agricultural. At the second stage, we looked at 2 agricultural zones per state, purposely selected, giving a total of 6 agricultural zones. And on the third step, we looked at 2 local government areas purposely selected. We did purposive selection because there are some local government areas that you can also get this flood existence. Like actually, if you come to probably let me cite an example in Anambra State. You find out that those in Oka zone, Onisha zone, and view experience this extreme weather events so much, but if you come down a bit to Agbata zone like Nnewi and everything, you find out that they don't much experience this extreme weather events. And those in Oka or Onitsha, it's because of River Niger and River Niger close to them. So they are riverine areas, and majorly they are the ones purely into commercial agriculture. So in the first stage, we looked at 2 communities which were actually randomly selected from each of the local government, giving us 24 communities. And in the last stage, we selected 240 households from the 24 communities. Then the results. Female farm households were selected. Find out that their age range between 41 to 45, almost 45% of them had this age range was 41 to 55. And when it comes down to level of education, secondary school education had almost 33%. Then farm household size, you find out that almost 49% had 6 to 10 farm household size, and extension contacts, 66% of them have 6 to 10 times extension contacts from extension agents. And marital status, you find out that 70% of those female farmers were married. And under cooperative membership, you find out that almost 57% of them belong to cooperative membership, while almost 43% said they do not belong to any cooperative society. So now, let's look at the natural disaster, the extreme weather events management practices that those female farmers use. We grouped it under land and soil management practices, water management practices, livestock management practices, and institutional measures. Actually, what is people actually carry out natural extreme weather management practices, but what sells this thought is the inclusion of institutional measures, because we looked at, yes, these farmers are also doing something for themselves, but then there are also government interventions, coping strategies that also cushion the effect of those extreme weather events on them. So we looked at the assistance they get from State Emergency Management Agency. We also look at their ongoing insurance coverage. Under the land and soil management practices, we have the land rotation, there about their frequency and number of persons that use it. You find out that almost all of them use these management practices very well. Then if you come down to institutional, measures now, you find out that it's only 40% of them that indicated getting assistance from SEMA. Then you find out that it's just 12, almost 13% of those farmers out of 240 respondents get registered with ongoing insurance scheme. So you find out that there is a big problem. There is an issue. If government has prioritized interventions to cushion this effect, is it actually getting to these farm households? Why are they not under insurance scheme? So it's a very great problem that this work actually revealed. Then also the level of intensity of users was also used. We have the high intensity, moderate intensity, low intensity, and zero intensity. And you find out that if you still come down under these institutional measures, they almost have zero intensity. So that something needs to be done for these farmers, for these female households, if they are to come out of the effects of these extreme weather events. There should be also something like so, okay, I will talk about that during recommendation. And in conclusion, a wide range of variation of natural disaster management practices, like we've seen the land, the soil, the water management, the crop and livestock and everything, and also the assistance they get from institutions like SEMA and insurance, their ongoing insurance coverage. So recommendation, I actually recommend that government agencies saddled with responsibilities of protecting the environment, cushioning the effect, helping those female households to also cushion the effect of extreme weather events on them, should also implement, internalize more effective and sustainable adaptation practices. And I also recommend that one of these effective and sustainable adaptation in practices is also to build up a weather index for those farmers. Then bring out policies that will favor insurance, favor them going for insurance programs. So for us in Africa, I think there is a very great need for this weather-based index for those farmers, friendly policies for insurance scheme and thereabouts, so that they will be able to come out of the effects of those extreme weather events. Reference both International Government Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, UNDP 2012. So thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Char, for this great presentation. Please write down all your questions and comments for her. We will discuss them later. We would now have another presentation on cassava seed production by Lilian Oyek-Bulam.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, the attendees and the panelists. It's so good to be here and to talk to us about cassava seed commercialization and profitability in Southeast and South-South agroecological zones in Nigeria. Now, before we go ahead, let's look at a quick update on cassava in Nigeria. I heard one of the presenters talk about cassava. Yes, cassava is more like a food security crop. Everybody is more interested in feeding their families. So most people are less concerned about the nutrition aspect. So that is why government is really pushing towards nutrition sensitive agriculture, and there are sponsorship from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to make sure that food is biofortified. So cassava is most consumed, not just in Nigeria, but in sub-Saharan Africa. And Nigeria is the highest producer. And with FAO statistics of 2018, we have about 59.5 million metric tons. And the demand for improved variety, assuming that our production is just a quarter of our arable land, is valued at 202.5 billion naira. That's a lot of money. So there is business in cassava seed commercialization. And despite our interesting profile, our production in terms of seed is not meeting the national demand. So there is huge business opportunity. Now, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded a project in 2016 called Building Sustainable and Commercially Viable Cassava System. And the first phase of the project was just concluded, and the next phase just started. And how do they achieve this? By producing quality seeds, improved varieties, certifying them to the National Agricultural Seed Council. So it goes from the breeding system, the Root Crops Research Institute, to foundation seed entrepreneurs, the seed companies, then to commercial seed sellers, and then the farmers will have access to them. But in this model, of the basics model, the farmers, there are some farmers that are selected as seed entrepreneurs. And now in the second level, you have at National Root Crops Research Institute, which is the research institute in charge of root crops breeding. They have a Mudike seed consult where the foundation seed production is aggregated and distributed to the seed. They call them village seed entrepreneurs. And then there is also a processor-led model for those who are interested in cassava processing, so that they have the right variety for their products. And then this is the flow for cassava seed. Now the research question is here. the socioeconomic profile of these seed entrepreneurs in cassava seed business. What does it look like? Then we also looked at cassava seed system. Has it been commercialized after 4 years, from 2016 to 2020? Is the seed commercialization profitable within the South, South, and Southeast agroecological zone, which is my focus study area? And then what are the determinants of participation in seed entrepreneurship for cassava? Now, this is the methodology. We have 4 states in the Southeast zone, and this is how the Nigerian zone, agroecological zone or geopolitical zone is. I used primary data using a structured questionnaire, and we did purposive sampling because these entrepreneurs were enrolled into the program and selected. Now, this is a quick view of the analytical model. I use descriptive statistics for the socioeconomic characteristics. But von Baron's commercialization index was adopted to assess their level of commercialization. Then the gross margin analysis was adopted for profitability. And then the ordinary least square probit regression model was used to analyze their participation. Result discussion. Now, this is the socioeconomic profile of the seed entrepreneurs. A majority of them are male. As much as we try to ensure gender balance and work towards gender equity and sign all the treaties, we'll still find out that in Nigeria in general is a male-dominant society. But we'll keep doing our best. So age, we find out that the population of these entrepreneurs are below the age of 50, so they are younger population. And then a good number of them are graduates from tertiary institution who are part of this entrepreneurship as a means of livelihood. And then the farming experience, those above 34 years of farming experience, they are quite a number. And then you have a good number of them have no training on best agronomic practices. They don't have the formal training, they don't know about it, they just work with what they know. And then training on business management. A number of people have gone to a lot of training trying to understand business. And this is what we have here. Now, level of cassava commercialization. Going by von Baron's commercialization index, the ratio of quantity sold to the quantity produced. Here we are below average. According to Olarewaju in 2015, there is a categorization of cassava commercialization into low, medium, and high. We are still around the medium commercialization index level. That means there is huge opportunity to scale up this, the formal cassava seed system and the commercialization of cassava, because improved varieties, a lot of projects that are funded. For example, the Harvest Plus cassava breeding project for the biofortified varieties, and Next Gen Cassava Breeding Project, which is global, that is funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and is supported by Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. They are doing their best to improve cassava varieties, and these varieties, they are there, they are known, but a lot of people are not aware of them. And we know that deal breaker qualities are more of the yield. These varieties are there, but they need to be commercialized. So there is opportunity for youths, there is opportunity for private sector investors to come and scale up this intervention. Now, the profitability analysis. I used the gross margin analysis. I couldn't put the table here because it's quite long, but from what we have, you can see that cassava seed alone is contributing to 50.91% of the total revenue in cassava production. if the seed, they sell a bundle for 1,000 naira. And this is the demand is still very high. So you find out that there is profit. You find out that for every 1 naira you invest in cassava seed farming, in cassava seed production and commercialization, you get 2 naira 17 kobo. And that is quite profitable. A lot of people have not noticed this, they are not aware of it, but this is an opportunity for them to cash into cassava seed commercialization. The National Agricultural Seed Council is now making the markets better and enabling the environment for businesses, because now they are giving certification. Very soon, people will not sell seed except they have certification from NASC. And that's the government's way of endorsing this intervention, and it's a way of controlling varietal purity and ensuring that farmers get the best value for their efforts. And now the determinants of seed commercialization. I used 4 functional forms, and then we took the Cobb-Douglas form as the lead equation because of the R-squared value and a number of things. And from here, we can see that cassava seed commercialization is better in the hands of the younger people, in the hands of youth who are able to adopt all the skills, marketing skills, extension skills, communication, ICT skills to scale up and improve their market. And they are able to go the mile to supply on time for farmers to use. And then we have also farm size. Because of the way Nigeria is, there are issues with fragmentation due to land titles and land tenure system. But for people, for example, recently, the Central Bank of Nigeria is opening up ways for anchor borrowers firm. Is encouraging people to expand their production area and also organizing farming in clusters. And this is a very good opportunity. So farm size, as the farm size increases, the commercialization potential also increases. Then agronomic best practices is also a critical factor. As you can see here, it has a direct relationship with commercialization, because the old way of producing cassava has phased out. A lot of people are not aware of it. IITA, the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture, and CGIAR, SIP, and other groups, RTB Foods, they have developed different steps for cassava agronomic practices, best practices, from weed management to traction to harvesting to planting, you name them. But these things, a lot of people are not aware of it. It really increases your commercialization potential. Then we have also yield. In our analysis, we found out during the breeding objective, when they were designing the breeding objectives, we found out that the attraction to buy stem is in the yield. So for those who are using improved varieties and they are making more yield, they can, if you have improved varieties, you have more market, because the demand for that variety is very high. Now, just to summarize the findings, we know that the level of improved cassava seed system commercialization is still at medium, and there is enormous opportunity to cash into. And then we know that a cassava seed system, commercial cassava seed system, is very profitable. It has a good share. In fact, as it stands, you make more profit from the stem than from the roots because of a number of factors. A lot of us have heard about the cattle insurgency. A lot of people are going through a lot of stress, but then you can always sell your stem. There are issues also with soil. You know, there are issues with a lot of things, but the improved cassava varieties, a good number of them, for example, the TME 419, well, of course, they did cassava naming ceremony. A lot of these varieties, their names have just been changed the beginning of this month. These varieties, they have good architecture, so you can always get good value from stem. Then the predictors of cassava seed commercialization includes age, farm size, best agronomic practices, and yield. And the yield is correlated with the variety that the farmer is using. And those who are interested in going into cassava seed business need to understand these little details. because in production, once you go to farm, spend all the money, is quite hectic. The joy of farming comes with your yield. Now, in conclusion, I recommended that the extension, research extension and communication, both from private extension agents and public extension agents, needs to rise up to this occasion and raise awareness of this. And then for those who are breeding or intending cassava breeders, it is very important to consider yield because it is a deal breaker trait. It's good to have a good greenish field, a cassava with good architecture that can spread like rose flower, a bouquet of flower, and cover the field. But at the end of the day, farmers are most interested in the yield because food security comes first. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Lillian. Great presentation. Let's continue straight ahead with Matthew. He had some technical difficulties before, so let's see.
So my name is Travis Reynolds. I'm an assistant professor of community development and applied economics at the University of Vermont. And I'll be presenting today on behalf of my colleagues, Atala Wubulem Nadu of Bahir Dar University in Ethiopia, Daniel Tobin at the University of Vermont, Crystal Jones at the National Science Foundation Socio-Environmental Synthesis Center, or SISYNC, and Brian Thiede of Penn State. Relationships between crop diversity, market access, and food security and other livelihood outcomes have been studied for a long time. So at the end of the day, the choice that a farmer makes in a rural community of what crops to plant, what crops to sell, and what crops they use for own consumption are influenced by a number of factors and a number of factors at various different scales. So you can think about the underlying agroecological conditions as shaping the types of crops that are possible to grow in a given context. You can think about economic factors as shaping the types of crops that are desirable for that farmer to grow in that context. And then you can also very much think about things like gender norms or local food preferences in shaping those crop choices and those combinations of crops on farm. So other researchers have used a number of different frameworks to look at these questions of on-farm crop diversity, livelihood outcomes at different scales. One such framework proposed by Brown et al. In 2014 basically pictures this system where you can think of the agriculture and food system here on the left as having this series of interactions with health and nutrition outcomes here on the right. But all of these interactions take place through all of these other factors that have both short-term and long-term aspects, and that occur at scales ranging from global to regional to local to on-farm. So looking at the map on the right, here's a landscape in northern Ethiopia, and you can think of considering that farm right at that farm scale. But you can also think about considering the choices, the decisions being made by that farm or that farm household as a function of everything that is going on within 25 kilometers of that landscape. What are the other crops that are being grown? What are the market opportunities that are available? And you can also think about those decisions being impacted at broader scales. And so what we do here is ask some questions relating on-farm crop diversity metrics. We use the Simpsons Index of Diversity to ask the question, how does on-farm crop diversity relate to farm livelihood outcomes? How do measures of crop diversity at different scales relate to on-farm livelihood outcomes? When I say we're also considering these across scales, we're not just asking what is the diversity of crops at the farm level, but we're saying what is the diversity of crops to which that farm has access within 25 kilometers. What are the diversity of crops to which that farm has access within 50 kilometers? And how do those different ways of considering crop diversity at the farm scale, at the community scale, at the immediate region scale, associate or relate to livelihood outcomes? We're able to measure these various things, drawing on large existing household surveys. So IFPRI's conducted the Ethiopian Rural Household Survey for dating back to the 1990s. The World Bank Living Standards Measurement Study offering more recent, again, extremely detailed farm household level data. And then the USAID DHS surveys provide a wealth of data on livelihood outcomes, not a whole lot on crops. But because the DHS data are spatially explicit, because we know where those farms are, we're able to join those DHS survey points to remotely sensed estimates of what types of crops are being grown in a given community, in a given region, and assign those values of local regional crop diversity to those DHS livelihood outcomes and see if patterns in things like household dietary diversity, household health outcomes are associated with the diversity of food crops to which that farm household has access in their immediate community or in their broader region. Using DHS data, so this is the DHS from 2005, we are able to tie those DHS survey points, so some 560 households in Ethiopia, to that remotely sensed data on how diverse the landscape is in terms of the different numbers of crops that are being grown, either within 50 kilometers or within 25 kilometers. If you look at the more immediate 25 kilometer scale, you have a relatively similar distribution. And you might sort of look at these two charts and say, oh, well, the choice of 50 kilometers resolution, the choice of 25 kilometers resolution, if you're using these kinds of remotely sensed data, it doesn't really matter. So maybe it matters more at the regional scale. So this is looking at some selected regions in Ethiopia. And here you might start to see a little bit more difference in a couple of these regions. So in the Somali region, in Tigray, there's some visibly different patterns in the distribution. But again, the means, the averages seem about right across these, not huge differences to report at that level of aggregation either. But if you go another step and say, what are the differences in estimated local and regional crop diversity at the rural versus urban level using this kind of method, then you start to see some meaningful differences depending on whether you consider all of the crops that this household can access within 50 kilometers of their location, or all of the crops that this household can access within 25 kilometers of their location. So there are instances where it does matter, where we might choose that more precise, that more specific scale of analysis. So the most specific scale of analysis that is often cited in research on these kinds of topics is at the household scale. So thinking about at the household level, what is the amount of crop diversity available on farm? And the LSMS, as well as the ERHS, the Ethiopian Rural Household Survey formerly, both allow for these kinds of calculations at that really detailed household level. And the farm household scale, we get an estimate of a Simpson's diversity index that's actually pretty different from those estimates that we were looking at previously. At the rural level on average, at the urban level on average, using these remotely sensed proxies, we end up being quite a ways off. The other benefit to looking at the farm household scale metrics in this manner is that we can now also join those farm household data to other potential metrics of interest that we think might be associated with on-farm crop diversity. So just as an example here, this is existing spatial data on agricultural potential, so potential yields on a given piece of land given a low input scenario, so low use of inputs, and also distance to market, so that kind of geospatial data that we might say could be associated with a farmer's choice to engage in more diverse or less diverse crop plantings. With these types of household data, we can look directly at those potential patterns of interest between is on-farm crop diversity associated with livelihood outcomes of interest, such as, in this case, household dietary diversity. And so what we're showing here is as on-farm crop diversity increases, there is a statistically significant increase in household dietary diversity score, or the number of HDDS food groups that household consumed in the past week. And we also see is much more pronounced amongst male-headed households than amongst female-headed households. If you account for market access and gender, some really interesting patterns emerge that you might only see if you consider all of these scale-related questions at once. So farm household, intra-household, so gender of the household head, characteristics within that household, as well as location spatially. What this chart is showing is that amongst those households that are within 25 kilometers of a market or within 50 kilometers of a market and have a male household head, there is a strong positive association between on-farm crop diversity and household dietary diversity. This is something that would make sense if what we're seeing is male-headed households with high rates of market access, able to interact and engage with those markets, bring in additional income, purchase additional sources of food that allow them to both grow more crops, potentially more cash crops, and consume more diverse diets. As you get further away from markets, that association weakens. So amongst female-headed households, the pattern is the opposite. As you are close to markets, the link between on-farm crop diversity, household dietary diversity is relatively weak for female-headed households. But in those more remote areas with limited market access, there's a strong positive association between on-farm crop diversity and household dietary diversity amongst female-headed households. Remote female-headed households potentially being more likely to adapt to resource constraints by intensifying or diversifying their on-farm production of food. So investing in food groups and dietary diversity for their households. These patterns do remain in multivariate models when you incorporate farm area, when you incorporate land quality, when you incorporate off-farm income, close to markets. On-farm crop diversity is associated with dietary diversity, but primarily among male-headed households. Further from markets, on-farm crop diversity is associated with dietary diversity, and especially among female-headed households. So this is just one example of the types of analyses that we are undertaking, linking these existing data sets to ask questions to sort of test the potential and test the limits of existing data sets, of remotely sensed data, of data across different scales to provide insights into these kinds of important
Great. Thanks a lot, Travis. Very interesting presentation using these new technologies. With this, I would like to open the floor for questions to any of the presentations that we have seen so far.